Hello, friends, and welcome to episode number 108 of Nostalgia Talk. And you know why I remembered the episode number this time? Because I was sure to write it down. My last few shows have always kind of been like, what number are we at? Nope, this time I wrote it down. And joining me for episode number 108 is Michael Schupbach.
Hi. Hello. Yes. Hello.
Welcome to the show. It's good to have you here.
Yeah. It's great to be here. Yeah.
Now, for anybody who doesn't know, Michael is a puppeteer and also a designer. He's done work in both fields on mostly television. Bear in the Big Blue House, Sesame Street.
Yeah.
He co-created the show Johnny and the Sprites. He was on the Netflix show Julie's Greenroom. He worked on Greg the Bunny, and he also worked in stage shows, doing puppetry and puppet building for stage shows such as Avenue Q and Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah. Wow. You've done your research. That's awesome. Small note. It's Michael Schupbach.
Oh, okay.
No worries. We're and I actually at my old job, the Puppet Kitchen, we used to keep bad spellings of my last name just as like a because like in fact right now I ask people to just call me Shoop just because everybody kind of looks at my last name on an email and kind of blanches a little bit. So Shoop is my new code name, if you will.
Shoop Dog.
Yep. Shoop. There it is. Shoop Man. I like that one. Somebody called me Shoopaka the other day, and it's like, all right, I'll keep that one. But yeah,
So many 90s rap references within the last minute. I love it.
that's true.
So, to kick things off, how did you first become interested in puppetry? Because you've done many different things in that field.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been pretty lucky in that regard. I've been able to make a career out of this specific sort of art form. How did I get interested in it? You know, a lot of it I kind of credit to my family. They didn't let my sister and I watch network television. We could only watch PBS, and so we watched a lot of Sesame Street growing up. And my dad also kind of piqued my interest. He would talk about how some of the Muppet characters kind of sound the same, or maybe point out that Fozzie Bear and Bert kind of sound similar, and he would kind of go, I wonder if maybe one person's performing them, and then kind of like walk out of the room. And that, like, at an early age, there's even a Mr. Rogers episode where they pulled back the cameras to show the set, and like I started as even a little nerdy kid, like watching it with kind of a technical air, uh, rather than just sort of the enjoying the content. Um, and so largely, I was just kind of a Muppet fan for the longest time. When I was in school and college, I wrote a report on Sesame Street for an education class, and then found out during my research that the Muppets had internships, and then applied to an internship from there. So like the Muppets kind of were my gateway drug, and I was able to like land an internship with them that turned into a job, and that's when I really got to like really kind of start my education, like working at the shop with all their resources and all of Jim's designers who was still working there. They were very generous with their time, so I got to really uh, explore the art form kind of through that gateway.
Okay, so the internship was in the Muppet Workshop. Because my next question was going to be if you were more interested in performing or designing.
That's a really good question. At the time, I was kind of interested in all of it.
Mhm.
I think it was my wife who said, like, I I said that I really wanted to work for the Muppets, and she was like, "You actually just wanted to be a Muppet," uh, and like that's
It's easy to say, like I want to be a Muppet. I watched a Muppet panel at Comic Con. There was Eric and Joey and David doing their Muppets, and somebody in the audience asked, "What if I wanted to quit my job and become a Muppet on Sesame Street?" And the puppets answered the question, but then they were like, "Are you asking seriously?" Or
I mean, kind of. That's basically that's been my career trajectory, and I think I've come as close as like a human in a capitalist society can do. Like I've been able to make my job with it, and so yeah, I was interested in all of it at the time. I didn't have any formal art school training. I just had like a lot of enthusiasm, and I was exposed to the writing, the performance, the building, the design, all of it. One of the nice things about working on Sesame Street is everyone, for the most part, is in the building and they love talking about what they do, and everyone's like really friendly with each other. So you can really learn a lot about the different disciplines, and the writers will talk about their inspirations for this or how they changed the lyrics to make this Sheryl Crow song work. The art department will show you how they make the prop letters and the prop books. So I really kind of call it my grad school. And I eventually, I wanted to perform at the beginning. I wanted to write, I wanted to design, and really design is kind of where I settled. It was just a place where I felt the most comfortable. And it's the place where I felt I could bring something unique. Um, I think a lot of people want to come in and perform, and the list there is quite long to get in. And uh, there was just something about once I realized that, oh, wait, I can draw a drawing, and then that drawing gets turned into a creature, and somebody brings that creature to life, and then millions of people see that whole collaboration. I was like, oh, wait, that's where I want to plug in. So that's where I've sort of focused.
And with performing, as I was researching for this, I read that you also did a little bit of performing for Bear in the Big Blue House as well. And there were a couple of asks on Nostalgia Talk's social media about that.
Yeah, let me put a pin in that legend a little bit.
Okay.
So I started actually at the Jim Henson Carriage House with my internship. So that was
Okay.
just in the office, like dubbing tapes, making copies, all that. Uh, when I got moved to the set, I was the only intern on the set. There's maybe only one or two kids my age on there, and uh, it worked out really really well. The I got along great with the cast. I got along great with the crew, and they started like pulling me in for like assistant stuff. So one of my favorite memories was Tutter's, the hole that Peter reaches through to perform Tutter was
Yep.
deep under the set, and the set was raised, so you kind of had to like crawl around on these rolly carts. You'd sort of like almost like a bobsled. You'd kind of push yourself along under the set, and Peter would just be sitting there. And if I had like 10 minutes and Tutter was in the scene, I would come by and just sort of watch him do what he was doing. And then every now and then Peter would be like, "Well, if you want to move the tail a little, I think that'd be great." Um, I would do like little special effect gags. So if Pip and Pop needed to drink out of a glass, obviously they can't physically drink; they are puppets. So you have to have a rig on the bottom that sucks the water out, and I'd operate that.
Oh, that's
Uh,
interesting. I always kind of wondered how that works. There's a page on Muppet Wiki that shows Muppets with mouths that are able to drink, and I'm like, how do they do that?
yeah, yeah, and there's like 3 or 4 different gags that they can do. I'll encourage you to try to figure out how. Muppets can carry a tray of glasses. If you haven't figured that out already, that's a fun one too. Like every time you see a waiter carrying like a bunch of glasses, in a scene, there's a trick to it. If you can figure it out, I want you to let me know.
I think I have.
Um, yeah,
I think it's like one of those glasses where, like that you'd find in a joke store.
yeah,
I'm just trying my best
um,
to describe it.
yeah. No, you got to keep going. In fact, I'll give you. Well, why don't we leave it to your comments? See if the comments can figure it out, and
Okay.
maybe we'll do a repeat episode for the answer.
Okay.
But and then last but not least, as that kind of went, like there's a little butterfly that I got to play, and on one of my last days, it was this shot where the butterfly needed to start on a leaf and kind of flutter, and then kind of lead the pan over to the characters, and I remember as the director Hugh Martin, and he was like, I was like 19. There's like 8 puppeteers in a hole. It's like a big day, and like right before they go, I hear over the stage manager's like earpiece is like, "Oh, don't screw this up, Michael." Um, and I didn't. I got the shot, and so that like kind of wet my whistle for performing. But also when you're a wrangler on the set, you often it's almost like the when you need some when you need somebody to fill into a scene, you're kind of like first up. You're sort of in in the warm up circle. If is that a sports thing? A warm up, a batter's circle? I don't know. You're often
I think
called
that would
in.
be like a
So
warm up huddle then, if it was
yeah, yeah,
sports. Yeah.
yeah, warm up huddle. So you get thrown in a fair amount. Um, the other thing that really I got out of the experience was at the time Sesame Street had a lot of international productions, and they would often come to the Sesame workshop for training. So I not only got to see all the performers from different like Plaza Sesamo, the Sesame Israel and Palestine show, but I also got to just watch masters like Marty Robinson and Pam Arciero do their training, and really build these guys up from having a lot of enthusiasm to like really being professional performers. So I got exposed to a lot of it while I was there.
Mm. So with Sesame Street, do you remember your first ever assignment? Because almost every shot that requires puppets either requires multiple background reoccurring characters or just new characters. It's like just put this one on.
Ah, that's a good question. It was a lot of stunt sheep right at the beginning.
Okay.
Stunt sheep and stunt penguins. So
They love
for
their
those,
sheep and penguins.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So they if for those of you who don't know, a stunt puppet is basically a similar version of the character that's sort of rigged like a crash test dummy. So it doesn't have a sleeve, it doesn't have a performer in there, and the limbs are kind of all wiggly. And so when you see in the Muppets like a sheep jumping on a trampoline, you'll see the puppet, and then this sheep will kind of fly through the air. Or generally, when the Muppet Penguins are doing something, there's one airborne at some point. So those are called stunt puppets. And that was kind of my first go through. Um, and it sounds like an easy job, like all you've got to do is like throw this thing in the frame. You're not responsible for the performance of it because it's just flipping through the frame. But the timing on that has to be perfect for it to read as like a cut, and then it has to have comedic timing as it's flying through. So it sounds like an easy gig, but it's actually quite nerve wracking.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, how do we think the count counts sheep every night? He counts stunt sheep.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the kind of thing. Like once you know that's there, you'll start seeing it everywhere. The other stunt puppet that I really like is Sheep on a Drill. We've got a special drill rig for sheep, and technically you can rig any puppet on a drill, but usually if there's a not usually, but whenever there's like a dance sequence and a puppet gets spun around and then kind of let go, and then all of a sudden you see the puppet kind of spinning through the frame. That's just a stunt version of the puppet with a Makita drill underneath it. So every now and then they'd call out like, "We need a sheep on a drill." You got it. Give me 10 minutes.
So, did you ever do any puppeteering on Sesame Street at all, or were you just always in the shop?
Let's see here. Well, I was mostly on set. So my primary role on Sesame Street was the wrangler. So I was on set every day as we shot. Um, a lot of background characters, a lot of right hands every now and then. Nothing that I think you could like go back and Google and like find. But one of my favorite memories was they were doing a scene with Steve and Eric doing Bert and Ernie, and they needed a right hand, and I swung in to do it, and like just the sort of like the photo montage in my brain of like watching that as a kid, knowing that they were on a raised set and trying to figure that out as a kid, and then like flash forward to like that moment where I was on the set participating in it, like and the same thing that inspired me as a kid. That's just a nice little snapshot in my brain of like, oh wait, like I set out to do the thing, I wanted to do the thing, and now I'm actually there on set, uh, participating in the thing that inspired me when I was a kid. So that was a good day.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And you also were interviewed very heavily for the Carol Spinney documentary "I Am Big Bird," which I watched.
Yeah.
And first of all, it was an amazing documentary.
Yeah.
I love it a lot. What was it like to work with Carol Spinney? Because from the documentary, it seems you worked very, very closely with him.
Yeah. Yeah. That whole all of that was a real gift. And I really We'll get to Carol in a second, but I really want to thank Debbie Spinney and Jason Milligan, the writer of his book. They both were very friendly with me. And Debbie, I think, was the one who kind of, everyone kind of knew that Carol was doing a thing, uh, and she was the one who kind of like waved me into to be in the documentary. And again, like what a gift to be able to speak to working with this guy. Like he's the same Big Bird that I watched when I was a kid, and not only did we become friends, but uh, I got to I got to speak about how difficult his job is, and Matt too, Matt Vogel as well. But how difficult his job is because both of those performers make it look so effortless. Like you look at Big Bird and you just there's nothing that takes you out of it. You just buy it as a character and you assume that it's so light and it's so easy to use um, that most people don't even think about how it works or how hard it might be. Um, and
I
it's
think it
it's
was
the
you
hard.
in the documentary who worded it as doing Big Bird can be hazardous for your health.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like it is hot in there, it is lonely in there, and you are always off balance. One arm is always up in the air, one is down by your stomach. Carol
And not to mention, you
was
have to look at two things at once because Carol has his scripts attached to the inside of the costume, and he's got a monitor strapped to him so that he can see what the camera's picking up, and he's got to look at that while he's reading the lines.
yeah, and I'll go even further. He also has to be paying attention to where he is in the scene more than any other performer,
Mm-hmm.
because the Muppeteers generally have their position, and it's usually close to the camera, and they might roll around on little stools, but like the area that they need to cover is pretty low. But Carol has to find a way to like sneak in and like stand with all these performers. He's got giant clown feet on. He's got these giant toes on, um, and he can't see his feet all that well. So this guy is watching the script. He's watching the monitor. He's watching his physical distance in the shot. Um, and he also has to make sure that the character isn't sagging and it still looks right. Because if Carol relaxes, then it looks like Big Bird has a crick in his neck. So he's got to stay physically uh, physically perfect in every scene. So it's really hard to do.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Talking about legends like Carol, that kind of makes me wonder. I mean, I don't know because you said you were on set a lot for Sesame Street, and it kind of makes me wonder if you had much of an interaction with another one of the classic OG Muppet performers, Jerry Nelson.
Yes, Jerry. I did. I was again lucky enough to get to watch that guy do what he did. Um, yeah, I got to work with Jerry a lot, and Jerry was what I would call just a pro. Like he came in, he knew what he was going to do. He didn't faff around too much. Um, he was very friendly to everybody, but he wasn't one there to distract. He wasn't really, he was there to do a job. And what amazed me about his ability to do it was how quickly he would suss out a character. So, he plays the Count. He's got, set characters that he's known for, but they would also call him in to do anything Muppets. So those
And
are
of
just
course, my favorite, Harry.
Harry. Yeah, yeah. Um, And Jerry's got such a distinctive voice that when he comes in, the character's already going to be uh, unique. Because, Matt can do a great count, but nobody can do Jerry's voice. Like, it's just so iconic. But I remember we were doing something that it was the precursor to Monster Clubhouse, and Jerry had a monster character. And,
Is that that
we
one
handed the
Monsters
character.
in Daycare?
This was Monster Clubhouse, so there was like Narf and Mooba, um,
Mel.
uh, Mel. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Monster Clubhouse was
and
from
Phoebe.
when I was a kid. I remember seeing that.
That's nuts. So Mooba was the very first Muppet that I ever made for the show, and Stephanie DeBruzzo performed her, and again, what a great core memory. But the point I wanted to make was like Jerry. We hand him this Muppet. He's never seen it before. He kind of like puts it on, and then he puts it away. He goes into the green room. He comes back in, and then we're doing our camera rehearsal. And as we're walking in, Jerry spends maybe 30 seconds just like figuring out how to make his character have a distinct lope. Like, all the Muppets are coming in with that kind of Muppety bounce. And Jerry's character has this lope to it. The nose is leading, and he does it like once or twice, and then they do the scene. And it was such a level of craft that he was like, okay, I'm going to make this distinct in the voice. I'm going to make this distinct in the walk. I've got it. I can relax. And there are days that I still wish that I had that kind of collection and just level of confidence in my skill that I'm just going to, okay, I'm going to do this thing. That's what it's going to be. Great. I can take a break and I'll be ready in 10 minutes.
So I think around the time that you had joined Sesame Street, Frank Oz was coming in only on occasions because he was usually directing movies. Did you
Yeah,
ever have much of an interaction with him?
I did. I did. I had a really good time. Again, Frank came in for like 3 days a year. Give or take, and they would save up some really nice scripts for him. And it was amazing how everyone like that was just everyone came in to learn on that day. Like all the Muppeteers were kind of around. The writers would come around and then leave when he would start to change the scripts. Um, there's a lady named Lisa Simon who was a director there. She started as the kid wrangler, and worked her way up. And she was like one of the last few directors who had not only worked with Frank but could was ready for him because Frank likes a little bit of tension. He likes a little improv in what he's doing, and he's not there to do it by the numbers. So everybody has to be ready to like catch a fly ball if it's coming their way. So, he looks at the script, he makes some changes, and then during the scene, he'll be improving different things. Um, and on one level, it's kind of terrifying because you got to be ready just to catch whatever he's going to throw at you. And two, you realize that's that tension that he and Jim had back in the day, where neither one knew what the other one was going to do, but they knew that they could play with it. And to get to see him craft that live was really amazing.
I don't know if you ever saw the documentary Street Gang.
I didn't. I should though. I should.
There's a whole segment dedicated to Jim Henson and Frank Oz messing with each other.
Yeah.
And I remember a previous guest on this show was Emily Kingsley, who was a longtime writer for Sesame
Yeah.
Street. And she and also Norman Stiles and Noel McNeil have all told me that whenever Jim and Frank had those puppets on their hand, that was how they interacted. They were not talking as Jim and Frank, they were talking as Ernie and Bert. And in one of those
Yeah.
bloopers, it's a segment with Bert and Ernie, and it's bedtime. And Ernie says, gee, Bert, it's too bad you couldn't come to the park and play with me. Yeah, me too, Ernie. But I had a lot of stuff to do. Bert, you said me too. That didn't follow what I just said. And cut. Got to do it again. Good night, Ernie. Yeah, me too, Bert.
Yeah, exactly. And like it's that kind of like again, it's that little bit of tension that keeps the energy up. And as the audience, I
That
think
tension
it's
also sometimes grows into swearing. There was a moment where Frank had Grover curse as a blooper.
yeah, and like you know, I I, I think one of the things that I appreciate most about seeing the Muppets like that close up was you just learn how many secret ingredients are in that stew. And it's stuff that you take for granted, but once it's removed or it's not there, you really feel the absence of it. So people look at the old Muppet Show, and there's something about it that's really appealing, and it's a mix of everything. It's a mix of the great design that went into them. It's the mix of the fact that they were kind of learning how to shoot puppets and were trying new things. It's the fact that the celebrities are excited to be there, and it's the fact that like all of those performers, they're not just doing lines; they're always trying to make it better. In fact, that was the sort of the credo that the Muppeteers go by is like we take a good script and we make it better. Um, Nowadays, I feel in production that that Jim really kind of protected that, and it can be a little harder unless you've got real permission from a director to improv and play around. Um, and it's that kind of improv and tension that makes scenes a lot more interesting to watch. Um, we were a good. It's not my favorite Frank story because I got into a lot of trouble.
Oh,
Uh, but we were doing a bit with Cookie Monster where he wants to show you the letter of the day, but it's written on a cookie. So he wants to explain what the letter is, and he wants to eat the cookie. Now you can see the tension.
I
Um,
remember these from when I was a kid.
yeah. Okay. Great. Great. So Frank would like do a bunch of these, and we had all these cookies laid out and all these props. So the as written, he puts a glasses and mustache over the cookie, and then he's like, "Oh, it's not a cookie; it's Mister Hello, sir." And then he does a whole bit, and then at the end, he removes the glasses and eats the cookie. Simple bit, 30 seconds. Frank does one, he shoots it one way, he does another one, and then finally, as you know, he does the whole bit, and then the mustache is still on the cookie, and then he just like eats it, like the whole thing. Nom, 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 nom. Great bit, love it. And I call my boss at the end of the day. He's like, "How did it go?" And I was like, "Pretty good. We got everything we needed. We wrapped early. The only thing we lost was those glasses, but that's not a big deal." And my boss was like, "What do you mean you lost the glasses?" And I was like, he ate the glasses. Like I've still got all the pieces." And he said he wasn't supposed to eat the glasses. Those were my personal glasses, and they were these antique. I think they're called pinch nez, but the little
Oh
ones that clip
no.
right onto your nose. They were vintage, and he had like handmade the mustache. And he's telling me how expensive these things were, and I was like, one, there's nothing I can do to stop Frank. And two, you gave your antique glasses to a ravenous monster, and you're mad at me? Like, let's.
It's easy to get mad at Cookie Monster because he's not
Yeah,
real.
yeah, exactly. So, I took some lumps for that one. But, like, the moral of the story is, like, if you've got antique glasses, don't give them to Cookie Monster.
Hmm. So I was born in 1999, so I remember a lot of these things from Sesame Street from when I was a kid, like Monster Clubhouse, The Letter
Yeah.
of the Day,
Yeah.
Journey to Ernie,
Journey to Ernie.
and of course Elmo's World, which is the big popular one. And
Yeah.
you did a lot of puppet designs and puppet building for that. And there were also some puppets on that who were motion capture puppets, like digital puppetry, kind of like what we're seeing on Henson Company shows now with like Splash and Bubbles and what else? Sid the Science Kid,
Yep.
which
Yep.
is a really, really interesting way of doing puppetry and making it look even more real than just a piece of cloth. I mean, it looks more animated as well. But because Elmo's World involved a lot of special effects when it came to puppetry, by which I'm also meaning like chroma key, because like
Mm-hmm.
I saw a picture of I think it was Stephanie doing a bird on Elmo's World, and she's in
Mm-hmm.
the chroma key suit.
Mm-hmm.
So there would be like a green or blue sleeve attached to the bird, whereas like sometimes in the case of Kermit, you could see that the sleeve matched the color of his skin of his I don't want to say skin fleece
Yeah.
perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you find that a challenge at all?
Um, you mean sort of working in that chroma key environment?
Yeah.
Um, well, every day working for the Muppets is a challenge. Let's put it that way. There's no easy day. Everything that you get is new, and everything that you get is due in a number of hours. Um, so you just have to be able to work with anything quickly and confidently. Um, which makes you bulletproof in any other environment. But it also means that the Muppets you are on your toes. The chroma key stuff was tough for us and the performers because often they're seeing it for the first time when the shot is up, and then they have to make a performance around it, and they have to deal with all the technical difficulties. Um, on the design side, you have to be aware of the colors that you're using. You have to be aware of the materials that you're using, and you can now manipulate the puppet in different ways. You know, the Muppets are known for having a hand just up where the mouth is.
Right.
But once you get into a chroma key puppet, you can have wires that come off the ears. You can have green rods that attach to a snout or a trunk or whatever. So you have to be able to go to the performers and say, like, I see what you're going for, and if I put a rod here, I think you can get what you want. Or I remember we had to do an aardvark, and it had like a tube in it, so it could blow something. You know, it could sneeze, and we that made the puppet heavier and harder to use. So we had to find a way to make it lighter, so the puppeteer could still have that kind of playfulness to it. Um, so was it a challenge? Absolutely. It was just one of like 50 that we got that day.
In one day. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like especially on Elmo's World, like Elmo's World, there's so much green screen that you just have to be able to rock and roll everything. Kevin would generally come in the morning, and we would have all of the Muppets laid out. So we would kind of shoot like all of those animal morphs, like in, you know, we would kind of run and gun them. So there'd be 3 or 4 a day. So, you know, on one day, I distinctly remember we had to do an Elmo spider and an Elmo bat. Uh, so the Elmo bat needed chroma key rods that would allow its wings to open. Um, and the spider needed Kevin's hand in the spider, and then it needed rods on every individual leg. Um, So you have to get that ready to go. So when the camera's up, the puppeteers are just there. They all they have to think about is their performance. Um, and with 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 Elmo in the spider's head, 2 puppeteers or 1 puppeteer on 2 legs. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 performers who have to coordinate what they're doing in the space of like a half an hour. Um, and you don't want to be the one where a rod slips out and then all of a sudden they blow the take. So yeah, absolutely challenge, and just like every day on that set.
Mm. Do you have any celebrity stories from Sesame Street that you'd like to share? I haven't talked to many designers, like people who work mostly as designers. So I don't know how often you were there with celebrities.
Um,
But if there
yeah,
were any that maybe, because you said you were on set a lot, so maybe if there were any that you like saw them work and it was like, oh my God, this is cool.
yeah. So, oh man, too many to mention. S- so you know, it's interesting with celebrities. There are celebrities who really want to be treated like a celebrity. There are celebrities that want to be kind of one of the gang, but still kind of want a little bit of pomp and circumstance around them. And then there are celebrities who just want to come in and like have fun on the day and meet everybody. Um, uh, so, you know, when Seth Green came in, he had just come off working on Greg the Bunny and was very familiar with puppets. So he just hung out at the Muppet table. And we just shot, you know, shot the we hung out for the whole day, and he was so friendly. I've got a photo of the two of us just like acting like posers on the set, on the steps. And then he wanted to try on the puppets, so he would just like he's like, "Can I try that one on? Can I try that one on?" And then he would walk around doing his own characters, not trying to imitate the Muppets at all. He was just like, I'm gonna do Cookie Monster's grandmother in this voice." And sure, why not? That was hilarious. Um, Jill Scott came in right as she was like her career was taking off and was just so happy to be there. She took photos with everybody, and really you could see that she was at the beginning of being famous, and she was on Sesame Street and was just so happy to be there that it just radiated out of her. Um, Let me think of Nora Jones. Oh, and
Oh, I
Tony
love
Bennett.
Nora Jones.
Nora Jones was so great. Um, uh, but I think my favorite was Tony Bennett. Um, we did a we did a fundraiser for Sesame Street, and Tony Bennett was the musical guest and kind of like the closer. And he came and met everybody, perfectly lovely. And then the payoff for that year was they brought in a lot of international Muppets from international Sesame Streets, and every international Sesame Street, for the most part, has a Big Bird style character, somebody large. There's like a giant hedgehog. There's Plaza Sesamo. There's a giant parrot, and they wanted all these large characters on the stage. So all of the Muppeteers backstage are wearing those giant pants, like the pants that you see Carol wear with the giant feet.
Right.
And he started singing. I don't even remember the song, but it was a ballad, and everybody just stood up and started dancing like slow dancing, but everybody was wearing these giant Muppet feet, and it was just such a surreal and
Just the
beautiful
feet.
moment. Just the feet.
That's
So
hilarious.
as we were dancing, you had to like be careful around their feet and not get stomped on. Um, and it was just no one ever saw it. It was a backstage moment, but the idea that like, oh, during Tony Bennett's live performance, of course, all the Muppeteers in giant funny feet slow dance. It was lovely.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So moving on from Sesame Street, as I mentioned in the intro, you also helped co-create the Disney series Johnny and the Sprites with the one and only John Tartaglia. What were
The
your
one and only,
contributions to
yes.
that?
The one and only. The older I get, the more I realize just like what a gift we had and how much John really pursues a full exploration of imagination.
He's one of the
So
most dedicated people ever.
yeah, and John's really got that gift of he's still got that kid inside of him that wants to see something magical, but he's got the technical experience and brain to understand how it needs to come together. And that means that he's unstoppable. So if I talk about how every day on Sesame Street was a challenge, it was magnified tenfold on Johnny and the Sprites, because uh there was always something that we could do to make it bigger or better, and so it just always meant that you could add something to it, or there's an expectation that it should be bolder, or you were trying to find a way around a limit of a budget or the amount of hours in a day. Um, and that kind of work is exhausting, but also I don't know if I've been on a set where the bar was set that high. So we really worked hard every day to make that show as bold and as colorful and as magical as we could, and hopefully it paid off.
I wrote John a letter, like a typed letter, and I mailed it to him years and years ago. And he actually wrote me back a handwritten letter with an autographed photo of himself and the Sprites.
Oh wow,
I still have that.
yeah. And also just a nod to that, like John is participating in a really beautiful legacy there, where you know people who are interested in puppetry would write Jim, and he would write back. John was interested in puppetry, and he wrote Kevin, and Kevin wrote back. And now you're interested in it, and he's writing back to you. Like that is a real. Um, it's a nice homage to the people who followed him, and frankly, it's just a real nice thing to do.
And of course, I've had so many of you guys, Muppet performers, and people behind the scenes on this podcast.
Yeah,
like this is episode. Yeah. I mean, I've interviewed more than just Muppet people. I've also interviewed like the voice of Porky Pig and Tweety. It's the same guy.
Yeah.
I've interviewed the voice of Donald Duck, and also the person who does Minnie Mouse. Who else? One of the kids from Home Alone.
Yeah. I noticed you had Fran Brill on there. Yeah, she's a master.
She's getting a lifetime achievement award.
And it's well deserved. She was another one who would come in to work with Frank, and uh, she at the time she played Zoe, and she was really kind of in that kind of kid headspace
Hmm.
as she was performing, and then she played Prairie Dawn with Cookie Monster, and the two of them just fell into this like straight man funny man bit where she was very prissy and didn't want Cookie Monster to interrupt her little speech, and so right before they would go, like Cookie Monster would like try to make her break up, and in character she'd be like, "Stop it, settle down," and it's just again, it's that level of playfulness, the idea that the characters don't stop or start based on the camera, that the characters are there even after the cameras aren't rolling.
I remember Fran mentioning that when it came to Prairie Dawn, initially she was just this generic little girl puppet who would just be used as an ancillary character and just kind of segued into becoming her own character and really went a little bit higher as a character personality wise too. She's like, I don't know what happened to Prairie Dawn, but she became mean.
Yeah. Yeah, well, she was dealing with a giant voracious monster trying to upstage
More
it.
like a few giant voracious monsters.
Yeah. Yeah, but also, I that's one of the nice things that you get from a show that's been on that long is not only do you get the chance to experiment, but if you click on something that works, the writers will pick up that ball and run with it. So, Elmo started in the same way. He was just a background monster, and Kevin was able to find something unique to do with him. Um, there was a while where David Redman and Joey Mazzarino had two monkeys that just had odd jobs all the way across
Joey
the,
and Davy, I remember them.
yeah, and that was based on, um, Joey's and David's just chemistry together, and the writers wanting to like reward that.
So, in other words,
Uh,
the two would go totally bananas.
got it. In fact, okay. Speaking of Jerry, there was a really nice moment, and I don't think I'm telling stories out of school on this one, but we were doing the two-headed monster, and that was a character that was originated with Jerry Nelson and Richard Hunt. Um, Same thing where those characters don't really have lines, like they don't write down the nonsense that the characters are supposed to say. They give them sort of uh, a beat to improv towards. Um, and they wanted to bring back the two-headed monster, but Richard Hunt had passed away, so um, I think it was Joey who was playing Richard Hunt's character, and Jerry was playing the head that he played. And they
I
did a
thought it was
couple.
David who took over because he worked so closely with Richard.
Uh, okay, yes, probably. Thank you for correcting me. And they shot a couple, and it looked great. And David's excited to play this character. And then for the second season, Jerry came in and said, like, look, I this character was the relationship between me and Richard, and I respect David a lot, but I miss playing it. I miss playing with Richard. So, I'd like somebody else to take over the character, and like, no fault to them. Take the character and run with it, enjoy it, but make it your own. And so Joey came in, and the two of them found their own pattern with it, and again had that frisson between them. And I thought that was so beautiful that one, it he wanted to pass it along to a pair that would have the same amount of fun, and two, just to be able to say like, I don't, this isn't for me anymore, but I want this character to continue, and you two have that same energy that we did. I it's just a level of grace and an honoring of the essence of that character.
And Joey's such a funny puppeteer too.
Yeah, yeah, and like that guy is just there's the creativity is bubbling out of him. I don't know if you've seen his Instagram or his LinkedIn. Uh he is taking Pringles cans and putting little mouths on them and puppeteering them. He's writing new songs. He's got a character named Chicky Bok Bok, who's like uh, very, very dear to my heart. Um, and you know, even though he's writing and directing, the core of him is still wanting to be a performer, and it's just kind of oozing out of him.
So going back to celebrities, another
Mhm.
show that you worked on was with the Henson Company. It was Julie's Greenroom with the legendary Julie Andrews.
Yes.
What was that like?
Oh my goodness. So I was brought in as a day player on that a couple times. Um, so again, doing assistant stuff, right handing, helping out whenever. You know, the heavy lifting on that set was done by the main performers: Frankie Cordero, Jennifer Barnhart, Stephanie DeBruto, Tyler, Paul. Like I'm missing a few, I'm sure, but if you look at the way those characters were written and developed, each character really had a place to have strength, and that's one of those shows where like the ensemble really becomes a complete individual when everyone comes together. So each character has a need, each character has a point of view, but and deficits. But when they all come together, those deficits uh, are fall by the wayside because each character has strength that the other one needs. Um, what was amazing about that was Joey was directing all the episodes and had to like piece everything together. So he was doing this Tetris puzzle in his head. But I got to be there on a day where Carol Burnett was the guest star,
Ooh.
um, and two things happened that day that were just amazing. One, I watched Carol Burnett do what Frank Oz did, and she would look at the script and do it better. So she did something different in every take. And she really treated each take as kind of a rough draft to get something better and better and better. So, you know, the first scene where she comes in, she's supposed to make this grand entrance. And, you know, Carol Burnett literally backstage stepped up and put her foot on the door and kicked it open. So the door slams open and props fall off the wall. And everyone's
Yikes.
like, cut! Like, what? And she said, that's how I'm opening the door. Fix it. And so everyone, and like, you know, again, she wasn't there just to like read the script and do her bit. She made everything better. She turned everything into a little Lotsie, or there's one where they're handing out food, and like, you know, like you have it a little finger food that you have at like a fancy dinner party, and she takes one and then sneezes on the plate, and then and the plate walks away, like just little bits like that that weren't called for, and frankly, no one's going to tell her no, and so it just made the show better.
Still
um
kept that Muppet humor then, because on the Muppet Show, the guests would often say, "Okay, I'm bringing my suitcase, but please tell me that this is not one of those weird Muppet suitcases that's just gonna blow up or turn into cheese, is it?" And I think it just like
right,
walks the guest.
right. You know, again, it's that kind of playfulness that I think really you know, identifies that era of television, but I think it allows adults and kids to enjoy the show in a way that is a little harder to find these days. Um, I was also there on a day where Julie Andrews, like I was having a great time. I was there near the end of the season, and Julie Andrews sat down and like held court and was telling stories about working on Sound of Music, or My Fair Lady, and we were all sitting around like the Von Trapp kids, just like sitting, like listening to these stories. And I remember telling somebody, I was like, "This is amazing." She was so helpful, and they're like, Today's different. Like I don't know what's up, but like she's really enjoying it." So we got to just have her listen to like her whole court, and talk about what it was like to deal with these famous actors and still kind of hold her own as a woman in show business.
I love it.
Yeah.
So, what was it like building puppets for stage shows? Avenue Q, Little Shop of Horrors, and with Little Shop of Horrors especially, I can imagine how challenging that would be because those puppets are humongous.
Yeah. Those are two very different experiences.
Okay.
So with Little Shop of Horrors, that was for the Broadway reboot, and that was Marty Robinson leading the charge. He had done the off-Broadway run, designed and built all the puppets, and then was hired to be the designer and performer for Broadway. Um, and Marty, as you know, wants to go big and bold. My primary responsibility there was I made a series of giant tentacles that ultimately got cut because they were a giant hazard. We had a giant worm screw in them, so these giant, like they were easily 20 feet long tentacles were supposed to whip on the stage um, in the finale, and so I made them. They were amazing, but too dangerous for actual humans to be around. Um,
Reminds me of a stage show that I went to once. I went to see a Neptune Theater production of Elf. Neptune Theater is our theater company here.
yeah,
And my favorite scene in Elf is, of course, when the writer that they have come in to talk about, okay, what's the story that we're going to do that'll get us back on top. And then
yeah,
Buddy comes in, sees this little short guy. It's like, oh my God, you have elves working here. And that really pisses him off and he smacks him around. When I
yeah.
saw the theater production of it, that was cut. And I was like, well, that's disappointing. But now I get it. You can't beat up your stars on stage every night.
Well, see, if they had hired me, I would have made a stunt Buddy the Elf, so you could actually physically bounce him on the table and throw him off stage, uh, or we could have an elf on a drill. See, these people need to call me. Um, uh,
I'll put your website in the
yeah,
description
please
so
do,
so
please
that
do.
people can reach you.
Yeah. So that was at the Carriage House, which is down the street from the Muppet Workshop, and we had to make a bunch of very big plants in a very small area. That's where I met and befriended Liz Hara, who was an intern there, and then became worked her way up and became a writer and a performer and a builder for Sesame Street. And I don't know if anybody's done all three except for her. So a lot of people really kind of cut their teeth on that show. But it was Marty, and Marty really likes big, bold ideas. He'll come in with a really complete vision, but really lets you connect the dots as to how to get there. So there's just a lot of real trial and error and experimentation on that show. On the flip side, with Avenue Q, I was working with Rick Lyon, and Rick is a very dedicated and precise builder. So Rick has his designs. Rick knows exactly how he wants them executed. Rick dyes all the fabric. He does all the final dressing. Um, so I think Rick made me a better builder than Henson did, because Rick was very exacting, and like if you glued something wrong, he knew it and could glue it better than you. So you had to really not only keep pace with him, but your work had to be very, very precise.
Mhm.
So Rick hired me in between seasons a lot, which I was really grateful for. So I got to work on Avenue Q from the very first reading, like in the basement of a church. I've still got the program around here somewhere.
Was that when it
Uh,
was meant to be a TV show?
yeah, when it was a pitch.
Okay.
And so the script read very TV like, and uh and I'd worked on it for a little bit, and then it came to the new, not the new Victory, the Vineyard Theater, and was off Broadway, and then transferred to Broadway, and then so I worked on it off and on all the way through the Las Vegas run, and it was a great experience. In the meantime, Rick would take on other gigs, like he would make portrait puppets of newscasters, and we did a couple of shorts for Nickelodeon. So same thing, like you have a design. Rick knows how he wants it built, but you're the one who has to figure out how to get it done and how to not only make a sculpture that looks the way that he wants it to look, but make sure that sculpture is kinetic and pliable and can move in a way that feels organic and real.
Amazing. Yeah, when Rick came on this podcast, he actually brought out some of the Avenue Q puppets for me. And normally when it comes to performers, I barely ever ask them to do their characters or do the
Yeah.
character voices. But he brings out, I think it was Trekkie Monster, and just puts it on. He goes, "Hi, James." And I just started having a little conversation with Trekkie.
Isn't that great? Like that's one of the things that keeps me excited about this art form. Now I work a little bit more in puppets and animatronics,
Mm-hmm.
but there's something in our brains where we are wired to accept puppets as something that we are allowed to play with. Like we know, like we all know it's not real.
Yeah.
There's nothing in our brains once you reach a certain age where you're really convinced that this character is real. And when a character is talking to you, your brain allows you to feel that it's real and feel like you're talking to a completely different creature. And it still boggles my mind how easy it is for people to fall into that trope, and the power that can come with that. They celebrities on Sesame Street talking to Oscar and really enjoying it. Um, even in Avenue Q, like you can see that the puppets don't have legs, that there's a person next to them.
Yeah.
And it's funny when the show first
Which
came
kind of
out.
breaks a little bit of the magic there. But yeah, you're right. Like we can tell that it's not always real. Like with Sesame Street, kids are kind of obviously there is a trick to making it look real, like it's actually thinking. But then you've got the green screen and blue screen stuff that with those puppets in full figure.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, when Avenue Q first came out, and especially the first couple months on Broadway, before it was kind of a known thing, they did something really smart. Like John comes in with Princeton, and Prince is in the cap and gown, and he's got his diploma, and he's on for maybe, I don't know, like 30 seconds, and then he walks off, and the audience. That's the time the audience gets to learn how to appreciate the show. They see a puppet, it's recognizable, but there's no frame around it. They see a guy next to him, and the guy is clearly singing and offering some facial expressions that the puppet can't do. And then he goes away, and then it's humans for a little bit. And that's the time that the audience needs to go, okay, that's. I listen to him, I watch the puppet, and anytime I don't know what the puppet is doing, I can watch the human for a clue. And after that, you buy into the conceit. Um, So often with puppets, I find you need to kind of give your audience a chance to understand what's going on and learn how to watch the show. The other thing that Rick did in his designs that is really smart is those characters a lot of them are everyman characters. So Kate Monster, Princeton, actually, I think those are and well, those are the two everyman characters, but their faces are very neutral. They're not trying to do too much. Like Kate has a very normal human haircut. Aside from the fur, she's got a normal sort of girl, like just girl face. Princeton, very, very slight alterations to his features. He's got a little bit of shading around his eye up at the top just to kind of give him a neutral expression. And that means that the puppeteers can go high and can go low and do a bunch of things with those characters. And the character isn't sort of a caricature. Whereas when you get into Mrs. Thistle or Trekkie Monster, those guys are supposed to be extremes. And so they represent a character extreme. So, when Miss Thistle comes out, you immediately know what she's about before she even speaks. And Trekkie Monster comes out, and he's all about, the internet is for porn. And then when you see him start to have more human emotions later in the show, you're kind of taken aback because you're so used to seeing him as this like stylized character. It's very subtle, but it's really good design.
Talking about realism when it comes to puppetry, that makes me think of a story that Noel McNeil told me. I don't know if you were there for this or if he even ever told you this one, but a kid comes to the set and badly wants to meet Oscar. And Carol, of course, when it comes to any of those characters, he's so generous and will just do those puppets for him. So he puts the Oscar puppet on and says, "Hey there, kid, how you doing?" And the kid's like, "That's a puppet of Oscar. That's not the real Oscar. Where's Oscar? Where's Oscar?" It's like I, I I I described it to Noel as, so it's like waiting for the big stars to come out. So
Yeah.
Carol's like, "Oh, well, just 1 second, I'll go get him." Goes behind the trash can, pops the same puppet out of the trash
Yeah.
can. "Hey kid, how you doing?" And the kid goes friggin' crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, I'll offer the opposite story. I worked on Bear, had a great time. I only got to do season one because I had to go back to school, and I was back in New York for a visit, and Bear was appearing at FEO Schwartz. And I was like, oh, I'll just like swing by and say hello. And uh, what I didn't know was that they put a camera in Bear's eye so Bear could see out. So I'm used to dealing with Bear where Noel, like Big Bird, like Carol, can't see out. So you really you gotta be able to like grab him and spin him around so he doesn't crash into things. So I'm used to kind of being his sort of his seeing eye human. Um, uh, and then I come in, and then all of a sudden I'm like, and Noel has just gotten zipped in, and I'm like, "Hey guys, good to see you." And then Bear looks up at me and goes, "Michael, so good to see you. I love your Superman shirt. Oh, you got a haircut." And all of a sudden,
It was a
Bear is
good
processing
impression.
this visual information that he's not able to do. He's referring to me to my name, and it just went right out of my head. And I was like, "Oh, Bear, it's so good to see you." And like instantly, I'd taken that costume apart. I'd sewn it. I'd cleaned it. I knew the ins and outs of it. Noel was a good friend of mine, and still in that moment, I wasn't talking to Noel. I was talking to the character, and we had a lovely conversation. It's wild.
So is there anything new at the moment that you're working on now that you can talk about?
A lot of my work is under a big NDA,
Okay, yep, that's
so
that's reasonable.
I can. There's some things that I can like mention or kind of I just was able to introduce. There's for the movie Avatar. In certain locations, you can actually meet a baby banshee chick. This is the only place on planet Earth where you can actually meet a real live baby banshee.
Wow.
And I got to be one of the handlers for that. So that's uh, the chance to take a creature that is only seen in a movie and make it real and have people come up and take photos with it is really wonderful. There's some stuff on TikTok that you can find. Um, Joey Mazzarino is doing some great stuff with Chicky Bok Bok, and I think that character's designed really, really well. I really like the character design of that character. Um, uh,
Are you the one who
the,
designed it?
Chicky Bok Bok is a really good friend of mine. Joey really likes him, and Joey and I and a couple other talented puppet builders share co-parenting duties with Chicky.
Okay.
Um, uh, and then if you keep an eye to Miss Rachel, there might
Ooh.
be a new character there that I feel the conceptual design is like really, really strong.
I'll
Um,
let my friend Chelsea know. Her kid watches Miss Rachel.
yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but
Right.
uh, uh, Miss Rachel and her husband are really, really great people, and they're taking they're picking up where Mr. Rogers left off. Um, and I started working on Sesame Street because I really feel that kids need a designated place that is safe. That's why I was introduced to Sesame Street. That's why I wanted to work there. Was I felt it was with all the terrible stuff that can be in media, we were giving kids an hour of just safe programming. And I feel that Miss Rachel is really doing the same thing and taking on that mantle. And I'm just very happy that she's doing it and happy that I got to meet and play along with her and her team. So, um, oh, and since I work under a giant NDA, I'm starting, depending on when this one comes out, I've got a website called Silly Side Hustles, and it's all the kind of stuff that all the kind of quick little ideas that I come up with that don't necessarily fit into any of my work, but I think are are fun little ideas. So a good example is I was at an event. I'm in San Francisco, and I saw a guy with a giant Adobe T-shirt on, and my long distance vision is all that great. And I, rather than saying the word Adobe, I saw adorable, and I was like, oh, that would make. Wait, adorable illustrator. I'm an adorable illustrator, so now I've got a bunch of shirts that say adorable illustrator on them. Like just stuff like that, where if I can make the connection and if I can crank out like a prop or a t-shirt or something that's got like an interesting idea, I just kind of want to see it out in the world. I kind of miss those days where you're on set and you could like come up with an idea, pitch it in the morning, make a mock-up, and then in a week you're shooting it, and then that stupid little idea that you had is now like an integral part of this television show. So that's how I get my creative juices flowing these days.
That's great. So when I announce these shows on Nostalgia Talk social media, links in the description, Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, you guys know where to go. I always ask...
Smash that subscribe button. Did I do it right?
That too, yeah. Smash the subscribe button, yeah.
All right.
So when I announce these shows on Nostalgia Talk social media, I always ask listeners if they have any questions of their own that they'd like to send me. And I got a pretty good one. This one comes from Anthony Thompson.
Okay.
Who is a regular contributor to the fan questions and a really nice commenter on Nostalgia Talk social media. I love, Anthony, if you are listening, I love reading your comments on Nostalgia Talk's Facebook, whether they're questions or not. And he wants to know, going back to the topic of special effects when it comes to Sesame Street, what was your experience like working on the Sesame Street 4D movie?
Oh, man, you guys do your research. The 4D movie was quite an experience. So the director of photography was the same guy who did the Muppets 3D experience at Disney. And I found that out because my boss had given me his old crew t-shirt from that show. It had Kermit with 3D glasses on it. Mm-hmm. And I was wearing it, and he said, why are you wearing my crew t-shirt? And I was like, what do you mean? He said, I was the DP on that one. And that was the last thing that Jim ever made. So one...
Now it's closing.
I know. That actually, when I visited, when I was a teenager, I visited that spot, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew that I wanted to do something like that. So that was the moment in my life where I was like, I think I want to try working for the Muppets. And it worked out. But the 4D movie was super intense because what people may not know about it is they shoot with two cameras and they shoot on film, or at least they did at the time. So the two cameras represent your two eyes that give you the depth. So that means that the film cost is, you're already using special film. So special film cost is doubled. The amount of lights are doubled, and the expense doubles. So I forget what the number is, but they broke it down to like a minute of film cost this, and a minute where we're not shooting cost this. So the pressure to get it right was super intense. The other thing that you have to be able to do on a 3D movie is you have to be very aware of the depth, because what it's communicating to the viewer's eye is how far away something is from the screen. So if you want something to either be in focus or in focus in 3D, you have to know exactly how close you are to the camera. So it was a very technically demanding shoot. And my grandmother came to visit, and she was all of like 93, 94. And
came to visit the filming of the 4D movie?
Yeah. She lived in Florida.
I heard, as I understand from Ricky Boyd, who's a previous guest, that you guys did that in Florida.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And actually, I'll tell this, and then I'll tell a quick Ricky Boyd story.
Okay.
And the director is just like he wasn't chain smoking. The producer was chain smoking. But we're trying to do a thing with Oscar where there's a 3D gag. Again, same thing. It has to be lined up. We're on like take 8 or 9. And like everybody knows at that point it's getting expensive. And my little like 5 foot nothing grandmother just came up to the director and just said, "I don't know why you guys are working so hard. That last one was great. You guys have got a bunch of these. You should all take a break. I love it." And the director looked at her like as he was pulling out his hair, and he said, "Thank you so much. It's so nice to have you here. Thank you. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon." And then went back to what he was doing. And it was just such a just a graceful moment, and also I'm so glad that he didn't shoot my grandmother on sight. Um, Ricky Boyd, who is an amazing puppeteer and also an amazing artist.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from him. Like when I started thinking about going to film school, he was one of the first people I went to advice for, and he sent me Amazon links on filmmaking books, and I still have them.
Yeah, I mean, don't sleep on Ricky Boyd. That guy is a combination of talent and just generosity.
Yep.
We actually got to do an animated piece with Liz Hara and Ricky a little while ago, and he was really good at educating us into how to make something work for animation, and also just making the process as smooth and as streamlined as possible in a really graceful way. But we're doing a shot on the 4D movie. He's playing the Count, and the characters need to pop up. There's 4 characters. They need to pop up into the frame and then pop out. On Sesame Street, it's not so hard. On a 3D movie, it's very hard because all 3 characters need to be in the same plane. They need to pop out the right time and come back down. And everyone's got these little hand puppets, and then Ricky Boyd has got the Count, which is whiter and it's got a live hand. And they do 3 takes, and then Kevin kind of barks at Ricky like, "Ricky, come on, you got to get this right." And Ricky's like, "Sorry, Kevin, I'm left-handed." And he was doing the scene right-handed with a weird puppet, and like doing it fine, but like just wasn't perfect. And uh, again, like what a classy way to respond. Like, I'm doing my best. I'm not at my strength here. And 2, uh, everyone's got the easy part, and he's not only doing a harder puppet but doing it with his non-dominant hand, and was classy about it. So I tip my hat to Ricky Boyd. Um,
On the first show I ever worked on once I got out of college, I actually got to do a puppet because there was some puppeteering involved. And usually I would help out with assisting. But at
yeah,
one point, our puppeteer, our lead puppeteer, had to go. So we got all of his lines when we needed to get them. And it's like, all right, let's just get some shots of the puppet just moving. It doesn't have to talk. So I put the puppet on my hand and I'm behind a tarp.
yeah,
And I had to hold my hand up for a really, really long time. And since it had no lines, I'm like, it doesn't really matter entirely what it does. I did make the movements look a little bit more realistic.
yeah,
But if my arm was getting tired in between takes, I just switch arms because I'm like,
yeah,
it's not gonna talk. Like, what difference does it make?
yeah. But if you're not careful, that's the take they'll use. I did I was lucky enough
They
to work on a
actually
show.
did use one of the takes of my hand lowering down into the
Right,
frame.
right. I was lucky enough to do a show in New Zealand for a little while, and we needed some B-roll. And I was doing a character, and I dropped the puppet, and I was like, "Cut, cut, cut!" And I'm like, "Nah, it's just B-roll. It's fine. Don't worry about it." And sure enough, in the trailer, the shot where I dropped the puppet is the one that they use, and it's, as puppeteers, you do kind of have to protect your work a little, because if the lip sync isn't right, or the character isn't quite right, or it's shot from a weird angle, it winds up looking kind of like a doll rather than a character. So you do have to have the ability to go to a director and say, like, "Please don't use that take. Please don't use that take." But every now and then one slips through.
Looks like you and I can both relate to that.
Yeah, in fact, there's one on Muppets Tonight. It's one of my favorite bits. It's a bit with Johnny Fiamma and Sal, where Johnny Fiamma is like trying to hit Sal with a frying pan, and it's hilarious. And it's Bill Beretta and Brian Henson, like the goats, and the take that they use. You can see Bill's head, you can see his shoulder, but it's the funniest take. And I love that in the editing room, even Brian Henson was like, I know we can see the puppeteer, but that's the funniest take. We're going to use that one.
Well, that's all I've got written here. Is there anything you want to say to wrap up?
No, I kind of want to give you guys a shout out. Like it's really weird to have somebody kind of paying attention to what we do. Um, if I do my job right, no one knows who I am or what I'm doing, because I'm really just there to design or build something in a way that makes the show feel complete. And usually, it's the if somebody's got to pay attention to something, it's behind the scenes. It's the score composer or the performer. So I love that you guys are shouting out some of the not only the performers but some of the more behind the scenes guys.
Hmm. Well, a big thank you to you, Michael Schupbach, now that I
Thank
know how
you.
to pronounce it correctly, for coming on Nostalgia Talk, episode number 108.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll see if I can find that photo of Seth and I. We both look like we are dorks.
Hmm. I'll share it to Nostalgia Talk social media if you do.
Great, sounds
Yeah.
great.
And listeners, I've got some announcements on the way for Nostalgia Talk soon, some guest announcements. Follow us on social media for that. And I will see you the next Throwback Thursday, which will be episode number 109. And hopefully, I don't forget the number this time. Peace out.
Smash that bell.